so-called peace deal that Trump has unveiled after meeting with Netanyahu in Washington. It stipulates that the conflict would end immediately if accepted by both Israel and Hamas. All hostages would be returned 72 hours of the agreement. It would also see Israel release over 2,000 prisoners, and Israel would not be able to occupy or annex Gaza. And it encourages Gaza residents to stay in place, but there's going to be a panel of experts to rebuild and energize the Gaza Strip. It calls for Hamas not to have any direct or indirect role in the governance of Gaza, instead handing control of the territory to a quote-unquote technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering day-to-day running of public services. It would be overseen by a board of peace headed and chaired by Trump himself and involve participation of other world leaders. And you'll like this one, Matt, including Tony Blair, former UK Prime Minister. So what's your assessment on this development, given that the resistance as of right now is still fighting very hard?
It's a propaganda show. Look, there are 14 other Palestinian groups. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. I can't remember them all. So yeah, they're not going away either. This may be Israel's face-saving way to try to get out of a very intractable situation. They launched their offensive to wipe out Hamas in Gaza City 3 weeks ago. This is the start of the third week. How are they doing? Well, the reports today are that the Israeli helicopters were quite active evacuating Israeli casualties from Gaza City. So the Cashapp brigade is not going anywhere. The other thing we don't really have a lot of good information on is I guarantee you there are commercial relationships between members of Israel's polite society and Hamas. We know from the past that Mossad was dealing with Hamas, whether undercover or without cover. Nonetheless, they had commercial relationships where money was being moved back and forth. I saw the start of the press conference, and who walks in with just before Donald Trump? Jared Kushner. Mr. I want to develop the beaches in Gaza, man. So, I don't doubt that there are some nefarious plans afoot to, like the proverbial camel slipping its nose under the tent. This is to get Jared Kushner's feet in the water there off the Gaza shores and to retake Gaza, not by fighting and killing, but by building and taking property and forcing the Palestinians out. So, while I hope for an end to the fighting, this is not going to solve the underlying problem. And look, we just had Bibi Netanyahu last week at the United Nations, sparsely attended, I might add, to make it very clear, there will be no two-state solution, period. So here's Trump talking his plan, and I don't think he paid attention to what Bibi said last week.
You have Tony Blair sitting on this quote-unquote board of peace headed by Donald Trump. No consultation with the Palestinian resistance, which is to engage in heavy fighting in places like Khan Yunis and other areas of Gaza directly with the Israeli regime. And of course, you have the rest of the resistance that has not let up.
Well, first of all, the Tony Blair issue, I mean, it's like a horror movie, really, isn't it? This guy is like a Dracula. He's just sucks blood wherever he goes. This is a guy that was led my country into an illegal war in Iraq, where hundreds of British soldiers died, or up to 1 million Iraqis were killed. The whole region was destroyed. He should be in prison. So, let alone the fact that he's chosen to be part of the governing committee or whatever Trump's calling it, is sick. And just again, it's an imposition. This is the US role in the Israel-Palestine conflict from the start. They've run the so-called peace process, but they're on Israel's side and have been from the beginning. So that's why it's so intractable. Trump's record on Israel is appalling. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem in his first term, and then there was the Great March of Return at the same time, and he didn't say a word as Israeli snipers massacred nurses and health workers and peaceful protesters who were just walking to the gates of their prisons. So I don't recognize them as having any right to impose a solution on Gaza. And if you look at I was just looking at some of the fine print of what they're saying. They're saying there's going to be a security buffer zone, part of which will be the whole of the Philadelphia corridor, the Rafah, or the border with Rafah, so that Gaza's going to shrink. I don't know. Obviously, it's got Hamas, obviously, and other resistance groups have had no input into this so-called peace deal. But again, that's emblematic of the way it's worked from the start. There was a ceasefire agreement that Hamas was basically close to 100% agreeing with, and then Israel bombed the mediators in Qatar. Israel is not going to accept anything other than exactly what they want, and it's a maximalist regime, and they got control of the Trump White House. So I don't know what will happen with this. Whether Hamas probably won't accept it, but again, as Larry mentioned, we should listen to Israeli ministers when they tell us what their vision for Gaza is, because they have told us from the start, going back to when Gallant said that he was going to starve 2.3 million people, not allow any food, water, and electricity. But even more recently, Smotrich, the finance minister, said that in a few months there will be no one left in Gaza. We're going to destroy the whole thing. Ben Gvir, the security minister, has said similar things. So I think their idea, they, in my opinion, they saw October 7th as their 9/11 and their fight and the pretext to finally solve their so-called Palestinian problem. The Palestinian problem for them is a whole reservoir of indigenous people that they displaced and kicked off their land and put in prisons. What do you do with them? And they've obviously, people put in a prison are going to respond and resist, and so they want to just get rid of them. And I think that is their end goal. This is what I look. We've all seen the images of Gaza, right? And they're doing the same thing to Gaza City now, right? It's destroyed. They've erased it. Every high rise has been taken down in Gaza City over the past couple of weeks. And the ministers have been celebrating it. Israel Katz was celebrating the highest high rise going down today, the defense minister. They're not doing that to allow the Palestinians to go back. That's not what you do if you want to rebuild. What they're doing is they're raising it. It's a year zero thing. And they're going to rebuild it without Palestinians. And there was a plan that was leaked from Netanyahu maybe about a year ago, where they envisioned like a new Dubai, and the new plan from Trump does mention special economic zones. And special economic zones, I've done a lot of work on. They're basically just corporate utopias. So it won't work. It won't work. And as been mentioned by other people, the resistance is still fighting in Khan Yunis, but also in other areas. In Gaza City today, there was an operation. So are they just going to accept the fact that they have to completely down all their weapons? They have to accept that they're living under this genocidal power, and they're living under the control of Tony Blair and Donald Trump. I don't think they will accept it, and they shouldn't accept it, to be honest, because obviously we all want to see an end to the fighting and the genocide. But if they put through this plan, I believe the end goal will be to completely depopulate Palestine. And behind closed door, they're probably aware of that. They're probably talking about that. They're probably saying, well, it's too hard. We can't move the people we want, because they've tried. 500,000 people have left Gaza City over the past week, but there's still hundreds of thousands of people there. They haven't been able to do what they wanted, which was to depopulate and move everyone to Al-Mawasi near Khan Yunis. They haven't been able to do it. So this is maybe a stopgap where they'll stabilize it, and then they'll find more peaceful ways or more effective ways to move the Palestinians, and eventually find a third country that will take them. That's what I believe their plan is. So I think, it's propaganda. It's either set up for Hamas to reject, or it's set up to be the prelude to a depopulation and complete occupation, and rebuilding it as a real estate bonanza for the Israelis and the Americans.
The resistance hasn't stopped. This includes also Yemen. We see the Red Sea ships continue to be attacked. Those who are Israeli linked, they're getting attacked by Yemen. And of course, given that the Palestinian resistance and Palestinian leadership have not been consulted on this, that won't stop the Red Sea blockade, nor the targeting of Israeli strategic sites by Yemeni ballistic missiles. And then there's this, I wanted to play you this because there's a lot of, I think, suspicions that, of course, any kind of peace plan, quote unquote, pushed through by Trump is really just serving Israel. So much so that we have Netanyahu. He's been going around mainstream media of late, almost running interference for himself, trying to show that he is not in control, that there's no one in control, that Israel has no role. I mean, we saw this with the whole Charlie Kirk debacle, where he had to go on Twitter and then mainstream media and say, we didn't do anything, over and over and over again. And here he goes again, talking to mainstream media about this claim that he is in the Israeli regime is essentially influencing and controlling the Trump administration.
President Trump has been an incredible ally of Israel, incredible friend. We've had no one like him. What he did in his first term in recognizing Jerusalem as our capital, moving the American embassy there, recognizing our sovereignty over the Golan Heights, getting out of the disastrous Iran deal, and then, of course, now joining us in the effort to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons by taking out some of these nuclear sites with us. I think it's great. I read somewhere this ridiculous slide. President Trump does what he does because he decides what's in America's best interest. And I've said this often, I don't decide a thing for President Trump. He is the most independent leader and amazing leader that I've seen in all my years. And I think many people in the world see that.
Netanyahu, I don't know if he was asked that, but he has no influence over Trump. It doesn't decide anything for Trump. Patrick, your thoughts about this and what this peace plan shows about Israel's interference in U.S. politics?
Well, first off the bat, reportage says the opposite, that Netanyahu himself is making cabinet calls directly and via Miriam Adelson and some of the big donors that basically purchased the White House in the 2024 election. So they, in fact, and it's worth pointing out once again that the entire cabinet, anybody that touches national security or that touches foreign policy, had to be pro-Israel and were shortlisted by the Israeli donor class, by the Israeli lobby. Okay, so that's the level of penetration of, quote, foreign interference, the thing they accused Russia of doing for the last 10 years. That's the level of penetration into this Trump White House. So it's unprecedented. It's never been seen before. And by the way, that's probably why they're dropping the ball so badly on Ukraine and Russia, because everybody from the State Department right across the board are only equipped and care about one issue, and that's Israel, period. Is it good for Israel? Is it bad for Israel? So that's that. Look, the leak on this so-called peace plan was a strategic leak. That should tell you straight away this thing is a complete scam. Okay, Jared Kushner, the president-in-law, as we used to call him, the president-in-law, he was the sort of guy who carried the Abraham Accords. Okay, he fronted that whole joke of a peace plan. And the feature about the Abraham Accords is that they never consulted the Palestinians, and the Palestinians weren't involved at all in this great grand peace bargain for the Middle East. And Trump still believes he should get a Nobel Prize for it, when in fact it was the Abraham Accords that probably accelerated the conditions for October 7th to happen. So he would get anything but the Nobel Peace Prize for that. But because of that, they're doing the same. The normal Israeli negotiation strategy is to make some kind of an impossible bargain deal, and usually in absentia of the counterparty negotiating, in this case Hamas. And then if it's rejected or if it's not accepted, then they say, oh, it's a perfectly good deal, and we offered Arafat or whoever the Palestinian negotiator, whoever's alive, to negotiate on behalf of the Palestinians or Hamas. Oh, it's a perfectly good deal. Trump is adopting verbatim the exact same tactic. He's even using this against the Russians. Oh, we offered a perfectly good deal and they didn't accept it. Same thing here. So this thing is designed to fail. But you read the fine print on this. The fine print. If Hamas leaders agree to leave Gaza, that's part of the conditions. Okay. So so are they going to go to Qatar and they say, well, we'll give Qatar an amnesty as long as they comply for this term right here. The other place where they might go is Egypt, because there's a lot of pressure on Egypt from the Egyptian public to step up and basically head off what is a huge humanitarian disaster and just an unthinkable situation in Gaza. And so just like clockwork, what do you have this week? Go to the New York Times, and they say, Israeli officials, spokesperson is concerned that Hamas terrorists have crossed over the border into the Sinai, along with anything like 100,000 medical evacuees and people fleeing the Gaza Strip. Okay, so they're creating the conditions for a 1978 PLO South Lebanon trap. And that was the pretext Israel used to attack Lebanon, to invade and occupy South Lebanon, and they occupied for over 2 decades, effectively. So they are engineering the identical trap with Israel, with Egypt and the Sinai. And by doing that, if they can claim they have intelligence, or they can push Palestinians into the Sinai, that gives Israel and the IDF license to attack what they call terrorist targets in Egypt. And where is that going to end? Okay. And so I think this is the thing. You're looking at a big scam that is underway now. And the last thing they have intended to do is any kind of peace, ceasefire, or stop the fighting. Israel always does one thing in negotiations. That's they drag it on to change facts on the ground. And right now they're just about done partitioning the West Bank, okay, by isolating East Jerusalem. And so that whole situation in annexing the Jordan Valley, okay, that's all in motion right now. That's all underway. And to the hard right, which is all of Israel at this point, Israel has shifted so far to the right. They're looking at this as the final 5 yards of the end final solution for Gaza. That's how they are seeing it. This is how they're publicly articulating it. So all of this stuff with peace deals, Trump ceasefire, I wouldn't trust them as far as you could throw them. And I'll leave it there.
In the press conference about this, he says this, Donald Trump, everyone has accepted this plan. I have a feeling we're going to get a positive answers. If not, as you know, Bibi, you have our full backing to do what you have to do. And I think that sums up exactly what the U.S.'s and Trump's posture has been on this from the very beginning, always with that caveat in there that Israel essentially has absolutely no leash on it whatsoever.
Patrick did a great job of outlining both the historical context, that this is deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra said. It's the past repeating, at least along the same chords. Maybe some of the specific notes are off, but the basic chord structure is the same. And Netanyahu apparently at this press conference, because I've been seeing, getting some flashes across my screen, he basically reiterated that, a Palestinian state is still unacceptable to Israel. And this entire fantasy about, Israel being this Zionist state. And what I mean by fantasy is its population, 80% of the population came from Europe primarily. Because you go back and you look at the census that was taken first in 1922, then in 1931. The Jewish population in 1931 was like 174,000. The Palestinian population was close to 800,000. And then within 20 years, the numbers had been completely flipped. That you had millions of Jews. Well, they just fall out of the sky. So, they've stolen the land. They're not about to give back that stolen land. And it's going to be up to Hamas and the various resistance groups to either find a way to fight it, continue fighting, and ultimately weaken Israel, or be eliminated. I would simply note that, 3 weeks ago, Israel launched its operation to take full control of Gaza City. Well, here we are 3 weeks later. You've got the Israeli military, Israeli Defense Force, with every single advantage an army could have. I mean, they've got full control of the air. They've got overhead satellites. They've got all sorts of intelligence collection systems. They have artillery. They have tanks. They have armored personnel carriers. And they have Hamas bottled up in a specific area. It's sort of like having Jim Bowie and Davy Crockett, locked in at the Alamo. And yet Israel can't beat them. They can't defeat them. They've had, for God's sake, now 2 full years to try. And it's not, you hear all these idiot Western analysts make fun about, the Russians haven't taken much territory. Yeah, they're fighting a NATO peer force, a NATO force that has almost every kind of weapon system that Russia has. And in spite of that, Russia keeps moving forward. It keeps killing more of them. Unlike the Israelis, who have a confined area locked in, and they can't defeat it. And right, today, as I mentioned earlier, they're taking more casualties. And so I think Hamas is content to try to bleed them out if they can, because Israel cannot sustain the casualties. They're already down about 2 million people since the start of the war.
You do have the resistance. They don't give up. Not only do they not give up, but essentially Gaza is itself what many have said is a prison, literally built to do what is happening to the Palestinians right now, a genocide, and yet the resistance doesn't stop. And I think this is a huge problem, both for the Israeli regime and the United States, which sees, of course, Gaza and Palestine as a big part of its overall power projection in the region. So your final thoughts on the situation overall, the peace plan, etc., wherever you want to go with it.
I think that the resistance point is huge. Like you've had 2 years nearly of 3 nuclear armed powers basically throwing everything they have got at this small little bit of territory. It's 20 miles long and 4 to 5 miles wide. And they can't beat the resistance. And again, like you mentioned, this is a prison. Most of the weapons being used are repurposed Israeli weapons because there's no way to get weapons in. So it is an incredible campaign fought by the Palestinian resistance. And I agree with Larry that the longer it goes on for Israel, the worse it's going to get, because they can't move. They haven't achieved any of their goals. Hamas and the resistance are still active. Hundreds of thousands of people are still in the parts of Gaza that they wanted to move. Nothing has been achieved apart from a complete obliteration of their reputation around the world and arrest warrants for their prime minister and defense minister. So they probably do want to draw it to a close. But I also think that as they've gone on this long, it does create the conditions for them to carry on, because they can't stop until they get some tangible victory, because they haven't. The hostages that they have got back have been got through exchange deals. Most of them they have rescued. So they did the Nusrat massacre where they killed nearly 300 Palestinians to rescue 4 hostages, but the majority have been got through exchanges. If the concern was to get the hostages back, that's what they would have focused on, but that's not been their concern. Their concern has been to obliterate Gaza. But I do agree with Patrick that this is designed to fail. Just having read in a cursory fashion what the stipulations are, because the Israelis firstly never negotiate in good faith, and secondly, even when they sign up to deals, they don't hold to it. There was a ceasefire on the first that came into effect the first day of Trump's term in office in January. And then in March, 2 months later, they just completely broke it. And it was going to plan. That could have been a ceasefire that would have got all the hostages home and would have created peace. But they don't want peace. They want to destroy Gaza, and they want their final solution. And they've got their pretext, which they probably are thinking we're never going to get again. So I think that they're designing this for Hamas to reject it, and as Patrick say, that then gives them a propaganda weapon to say, well, we offered everything that they needed, and they rejected us. The other thing is, it's also suicidal on the part of Hamas, because the Israelis, although they say we'll do an amnesty, they will hunt down and kill every single person, Hamas fighter and Hamas negotiator. They did it with the Shalit deal in 2006, and well, he was taken in 2006, but released 5 years later, and they hunted down all the people that were involved in negotiating that. They bombed the negotiators in Qatar, as I mentioned last month. There's no way that they will abide by allowing these people to leave and set up shop in another country and not hunt them down at some point. So from Hamas's perspective, what have they got to lose? They either continue the resistance or and are taken out eventually, or they put down their weapons and surrender, and they're taken out in another way. So the Israelis, there's no way out for them. So the incentive is to carry on, because in some senses they're winning. Israel's not achieved any of its goals. They're bleeding out the Israeli society itself. There's a lot of problems for Netanyahu domestically. So why sign up to this Trump and Netanyahu designed so-called peace deal?